Well, it's official. The UK's over. They may as well pack it in. They're done. Liz Truss has been sworn in. I think I'm using that term correctly. I don't know. That's what we call it here in America. I don't know if they call it that in Britain. But for our purposes, she's been sworn in as the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I mean, as if the clown world wasn't clownish enough. You thought Boris was bad? You thought Boris was a clown? You thought Boris was an absurd personality with even more absurd politics? Enter Liz Truss. The woman who, despite being the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, specializing in UK-Russia relations, trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine, she couldn't tell the Black Sea from the Baltic Sea. She told the Russians that she would never tolerate Russian troops being present on Russian soil because she viewed that as a foreign occupation. Presumably because she thought that this city in Russia was actually in Ukraine, despite undisputably being in Russia. And let us not forget the cherry on top. Actually, you know what? No, there's one more thing I want to add. One more ridiculous thing before I get to the really serious, terrible thing about Liz Truss. Other than, her whole political persona. I mean, all of her is bad. But these are some of the highlights. She walked around the streets of Moscow peacocking in a full fursuit when it was like 80 degrees outside for a photo op because she wanted to look like Margaret Thatcher. Her intention was to become the next prime minister, to trample on Boris's grave. And to set that up, she wanted to wear these furs, look like Lady Thatcher, and go parade around Moscow, even though it wasn't cold out. And when Thatcher, was photographed famously on her trip to Moscow, and she was dressed similarly, it was quite cold out from what I recall. So again, the woman is a clown, she's an actor, and a bad actor at that. She is a funhouse mirror version of Margaret Thatcher, who was, for all her faults, at least a serious person. There's plenty to criticize Thatcher for on her politics or actions that she took. Putting all that aside, she was at the very least a leader. She was someone who had her own ideas, who actually thought about things, unlike, let's say, Liz Truss or Boris Johnson or Theresa May. Liz Truss, the UK just keeps getting worse. Actually, I don't know. It's hard to say that Boris was worse than Theresa May because we don't know what Theresa May would have been done in this Ukraine situation. I mean, Boris is not helped by the circumstances because he made a complete fool of himself. He caused the deaths of untold tens of thousands of Ukrainians because he scuttled a peace deal that was agreed by both parties, by the Russians and the Ukrainians, fairly early on. We've known this for quite a while. And Boris flew to Kiev immediately and told the Ukrainians, no, you are going to stand and fight. You are going to fight the Russkies to the last Ukrainian. And I don't give a damn what you've agreed to. I do not agree. And thus, the deal was off, the war was back on, and since then, tens of thousands of Ukrainians, as well as who knows however many Russians, how many thousands of Russians have been killed. Then, of course, you have the lockdowns in the UK. Those two things, which, caused untold suffering. You have the sanctions. I almost was saying embargo. It's not quite embargo, I don't think, officially. You have all the sanctions on Russia that have caused energy prices in the UK to necessarily skyrocket. To borrow a phrase from Barack Obama, talking about what he wanted to do to U.S. energy prices. Thankfully, Obama did not succeed in that. But where Obama failed, Boris Johnson was successful in spades. In fact, it's gotten so bad that on popular British morning shows, you know how they normally would do these things? Oh, the ninth caller, we're going to give you $1,000. A grand in your hand is a popular tagline I think that Clear Channel uses here in the United States. They say, hey, listen for the keyword at the bottom of the hour, and then call up and tell us what word you heard, and the ninth caller who gets it right is going to get $1,000. And they do the same gimmicks on British radio stations, but now they're giving you the option. Do you want £1,000, or do you want us to pay your power bill for 4 months? And people, without hesitation, are choosing, oh my gosh, please pay my power bill for 4 months. That's so much more than £1,000. You'll be lucky if your power bill in the United Kingdom is only £1,000 per month. For many people, it likely will be much more. And for businesses, who knows how much. We've seen only a few of these power bills circulating from across the EU online. Businesses, small businesses with power bills around 10,000. And so this is the reality that Liz Truss is stepping into as Prime Minister. And what's she going to do about it? Well, if you listen to her, she's going to do absolutely nothing except make it worse, because she supports everything Boris did, and in fact, she thinks that Boris didn't go far enough. That's the real problem in the United Kingdom, is that they're not tough enough on Russia. If only they sanctioned Russian gas a little harder, if only they drove up electricity prices a little higher, then, oh then, the Ukrainians, led by the ghost of Kiev, would be marching on Moscow, just as Liz Truss marched on Moscow in her fine fur coat. And if that doesn't work, well, Liz Truss made it clear recently, as I've talked about on this channel, she is ready and willing to use nuclear weapons and sees it as her duty as Prime Minister to administer. Is that poor grammar for the Prime Minister to administer? Anyway, she's going to use nukes. Now, use nukes why? I don't really know. But she's going to find a reason. Or at least that seems to be how she's talking. So, as far as the British public is concerned, with Boris out and Liz Truss in, it is really out of the pot and into the fire. But what option do they have? Keir Starmer? If they had an election, a real election, and got rid of the Conservatives, who is there? Keir Starmer? Really? I mean, at least Jeremy Corbyn, back before the deep state took him out, he was at least an alternative. He was different from Boris and Liz Truss. I didn't agree with him on many things. I thought he was terrible in a lot of ways. I probably would have really detested him if I were a British person. But these days, you compare him to what the mainstream is doing. You know what? Maybe it wouldn't have been such a bad idea to give old Jeremy Corbyn a shot. Because even if he was nuts and a communist, at least he would have let you have electricity and gas to heat your home. Now, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jeremy Corbyn has gone crazy with all these other people too. Maybe he no longer is a Russki sympathizer like he used to be. I mean, if I remember correctly, wasn't Jeremy Corbyn like a spy for the communist Czechoslovakia? I mean, he should be a big buddy with Putin, right? And if that's the case, even if you don't like Putin, at least you could have cheap gas if your prime minister is a so-called Putin puppet, right? But of course, they had to chase him out. And what did? They canceled him. They said, oh, well, he's an anti-Semite because he has the wrong political views. And so now, Britain has no alternative. Where's Nigel Farage? He's nowhere to be seen. I mean, he's on YouTube. He does talk. He's around. But there's no critical mass of people who would support Nigel Farage. Unfortunately, I wish there was. Maybe the UK has to hit rock bottom before they would consider supporting someone reasonable like Farage, who I think would bring energy prices down, who would start drilling for oil, maybe mining more coal, and stop this silly sanctions war that is only hurting the British people and doing nothing to harm the Russian government or their military capabilities. But then again, the British establishment and the British media could just blame Farage for everything and say that, the reason why the entire European economy is collapsing, not just Britain's, in unison, is because of Brexit and nothing to do with sanctions. The UK establishment loves to blame everything on Brexit. Even, Liz Truss, who's now supposedly a hardened Brexiteer, even though she was a Remoaner for the entirety of the campaign. So in short, there is no hope for Britain. Few nations are as suicidal. Germany is probably the only one who's topping them right now. I think that the French, the Italians, obviously the Hungarians, they'll all pull themselves out of this catastrophe prior to the British. The British just have no chance. There is no real opposition in the country. And so I think nothing will change until the people of Britain wake up. Until they wake up and smell the ashes, to borrow a phrase from the G-Man. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.